All right, good morning. You made it. It's Friday, right? And storms are coming in our neck of the woods. I think they've been saying that forever, and they better show up because I was heading to the beach this weekend, and it looked like it was going to rain the whole time, and I didn't want to just waste my time. Although being at the beach in the rain is still a good thing. I got work to do here, so. But anyway, man, I'm excited about this day, about what's going on in your world, and what's going on in our world. And so life is good. Really, it's as good as you want it to be because it's all about perspective. It's about how we see things, and that's what's going on. So let me ask you a question before we get started because we're shifting gears. I love just what's going on in the book of Mark, but so if I were to ask you, what is it that wakes you up at 2 o'clock in the morning? But besides maybe getting old and aches and pains, but I mean, what are the things that your mind begins to imagine at 2 o'clock in the morning? What's going on there with you? What are the things that you find cause you to tremble, to worry, to and everybody denies that they worry. So can we just be honest here and say that that's a part of life? We're human, and so we do. So don't play the whole, oh, I'm not afraid of anything game, because at the end of the day, we all are afraid of some things, right? So let's just be honest with ourselves. And let me just think about, what is it that you're afraid of? What is it that causes you to worry in this life? All right, now. Let's move to the scriptures. All right. Now, so we're in the scenario. We're in the Gospel of Mark. It's been a long day for the Lord. He was up early, and he had appointed the apostles. He begins to teach by the seaside. He tells some stories, and in the telling of these stories, he begins to speak a parable, which is meant to kind of make it difficult for some people to understand the truth. And so there has to be this pursuit of it. So he told the story of the parable of the sowers. And then when he gets the guys and his disciples, some of the women and all together, he begins to explain the parable. So you have to understand these things, he says. If you can't understand these things, you won't be able to understand the other things of God. And so this is what's going on in this scenario. And so it's the end of the day. They're having this conversation, and then Jesus says, "Hey, let's head across the lake." So we're in the town of Capernaum. We've just seen. I mean, we've followed these disciples now. We've seen the paralytic broken through the roof and him heal him. We've seen the leper that's been healed. We've heard the demons call out his name, that he is the Son of God, and him rebuke the demons and quiet them. We've seen all of these things. What Mark doesn't tell us is that we also saw him change water into wine. We have seen so many of these miracles of Jesus. We have seen his ability to confound the brightest of the theologians in the land and cause them to not even be able to know how to answer a question. We know how brilliant he is. We know everything about those things, just as they do. Now, they're in the boat, and let's just read the text. But before we do, I want to jump to the first, just above the story that we're going to read today in verse 33. It says this: "And with many such parables, he was speaking the word to them, so far as they were able to understand it. And he did not speak to them without a parable, but he was explaining everything privately to his own disciples." So he's teaching, and he's not explaining what he's teaching to everybody. But when he gets the disciples together, there's this intimacy. I don't want us to miss the reality that Jesus had this intimacy with those that were with him. Now, you and me are with him. I want you to understand that you have an intimate relationship with the Savior. Not just like, well, yeah, he's God and I'm down here. No. It's an intimate relationship that you and I have. James, as he speaks, says this: if you draw near to Jesus, Jesus will draw near to you, right? So we know that there's this, that when I decide to stay in close proximity to him, just like the disciples, he will show me things that he doesn't, that others don't, because they didn't press in. I know that he has put his spirit within me so that his spirit guides me into all truth, not just in the casual reading of the scriptures necessarily, but when I say, Lord, speak for your servants listening, and I open up the sacred text and I begin to read it, the spirit of the living God who lives within me because I'm in close proximity to him and because I am emptying myself that I may be filled with him, he shows me things in the word that you just can miss if you're not careful. And he says that if I lack wisdom, James does, and I ask God, he gives freely to me that wisdom. So I want you to understand, we are the disciples. We are the disciples. Now let's go on this journey together. So they're in Capernaum. It's the northwest side of the Sea of Galilee, which really isn't. It's a weird section of this lake. In fact, I'm told that a lot of archaeologists and people who study weather and everything love to go there because it's the lowest sea in the world next to the Dead Sea. But this one it actually has prolific in its fishing industry if you study that. But because of how it sits low and the mountains, there are these storms that come up. And so, and you know all this, and you know where we're going if we do that. But so these guys are in the boat with Jesus. Not all of them. Let's read the story, and then let's talk about it. On that day, when evening came, he said to them, let's go over to the other side. So he's had his whole full day. He's spent some time privately with them explaining things. And then he says, on that same day, Luke says, Mark says, we all got in a boat. Let's go over to the other side. After dismissing the crowd, they took him along with them in the boat, just as he was. In other words, what it's saying is he didn't go change clothes. He didn't eat. He just as he was. Hey, we're in the boat already. Let's just go across. And it says, and other boats were with him. Now, I was telling the Tamster today, I said, I did not know there was a flotilla. I didn't know that. And I don't know why, because I've read this 1,000 times. But it's like today as I'm reading it, it says, and other boats were with them. So there's a little flotilla heading over to the other side. There's a reason why Jesus is going to the other side, and we'll find out that Monday. That reason is there was a man fully demoniac, filled with them, that the Savior wanted to free. I love the fact that he's willing to do whatever it takes to get to that one, right? It's like he said, I'm not going to leave the 90, I'm going to leave the 99, I'm going to go after the one. And if you've been that one before, you're grateful for the truth of that. But let's get to the story. So they're in the boat, right? You get it? Now, the scripture says that Jesus, when he first got in the boat, this is how Luke says it. He falls asleep. I mean, Jesus is dead tired. That's the humanity of Jesus. He's been up all night praying. He's been teaching all day. He's in the sun on the seashore and gets in this boat. And there's a cushion in the back of the boat in the stern. And he lays down. We don't know how big this boat is. We assume it's a normal fishing boat. But for whatever it is, they're sailing. They're not rowing. We do know that. So he lays on the cushion of the boat. He's asleep. Now, it says, and a fierce gale of wind developed. Now, that fierce gale of wind means hurricane type. That's what this means. If you were to just study that phrase and that wording, we're talking about hurricane. We're not talking about just a mild deal. If we were to look at it closely, we would find out that that the word says that they were swamped. I think that's how Luke says it. They were swamped with this water. They were covered with the waves. So it's coming over. It's filling up the boat. Now, I find this amazing that in all of this, so this boat is obviously listing from one side to the other, and the sail and the mast is leaning over whichever way the wind is going, and the waves are hitting it. And this thing is going crazy, and they are fearful for their life. This is a real situation. This isn't, it's a little storm and you're afraid. No, this is like the real deal. And so it says a fierce gale of wind developed, and the waves were breaking over the boat so much that it was already filling with water. And yet Jesus himself was in the stern, asleep on the cushion. I love that. I love the concept that here's Jesus, and I mean, because he's God and because he knows his mission, there's no fear in his life. He's just enjoying the cradle rock, right? I mean, that's kind of what's going on here. And it says, and yet Jesus himself is in the stern, and they woke him and said to him, Teacher, Master, they say in some of the other versions. Master, teacher, don't you care we're all going to die? And he gets up. 2 versions. Matthew says that he said, why are you guys afraid? And he rebukes it. Luke and Mark say he rebuked it and then said, why are you afraid? My theory is he looked at Matthew, who's the one who woke him up potentially, and said, Master. And he goes, why are you so afraid? And then he rebukes the wind and then looks at the rest of them and says, why are you afraid? But listen to what he says. He got up and he rebuked the wind and the sea and said, so he rebukes the wind, right? Stop. And then it says, and then he said to the sea, hush, be still. And all the noise of those waves that are crashing against the boat, it's calm. Can you imagine? Can you imagine how, and the wind, it's just going everywhere. He rebukes it. And so all of a sudden, there's no wind. I'm assuming it's not like, hey, slow down. He's like, hey, stop. No wind. 0 wind. The waves immediately, the crest just drops. And it's as calm as glass. That's a setting to have a conversation, right? I mean, if there's going to be one, this is it. And so they've said that the wind dies down and it became perfectly calm. And he said to them, "What? Why are you afraid?" I'm sure they're still shaking. I mean, listen, they literally thought they were going to die. I don't want to minimize this situation. And I don't want you to minimize in your head, well, if I'd have been there, no, if you'd have been there, you'd acted just like that. Okay, can we have that honest conversation? There are times when things come and we fail to remember who is in the boat with us. All right. And so I just think we need to know that. In fact, let's just remind ourselves of a few things while we're having this conversation. This is what John the Apostle wrote, not about this story, but this is the opening verse passage of his gospel. And here's what he says. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He's speaking about Jesus. He's the Word. He speaks, and it is so. He was in the beginning with God. All things, that sea that they're sailing on, the trees that made the boat, all of that came into being through him. And apart from him, not even one thing came into being that hasn't come into being. There's not one thing you look at in this world. Look at anything that your eyes show you right now. It had its creation in God himself. In him was life, and the life was the light of mankind. And the light shines in the darkness, yet the darkness doesn't grasp it. That's our world. Listen to how the writer of the Hebrews says, in these last days has spoken to us in his Son, whom he appointed, God is, heir of all things, through whom he also made the world. God made the world, and now he owns it. And he is the radiance of his glory and the exact representation of his nature, and upholds all things by his power. Should the Lord decide today, I'm not going to do anything, our whole world would collapse. You understand? This is what he says. What holds everything together? The power of God himself. I wish these things would resonate deep inside some of you that need to hear this desperately. Now listen to how Colossians says it. For he rescued us from the dominion of darkness and transferred us to the kingdom of his beloved Son, in whom we have redemption, the forgiveness of sins. He is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation. For by him all things were created, both in heaven and on earth. And all things have been created through him and for him. Those things visible, those things invisible. Whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities, he is before all things, and in him all things hold together. Can I just remind us, as silly as it sounds, that is true? If I am in the boat with Jesus, I am in the boat with the one who holds everything in his hand. Everything. Whether it's COVID, whether it's climate change, whether it's the gender in which your children are born, all of that. He is in all of that. He formed every one of us in the mother's womb. That's why it angers me when I see people trying to play God and decide what gender somebody. You don't get the privilege of deciding that. I told Tammy, I said, I'm not trying to be political today, so I'm not. I'm going to be quiet. But I'm just going to let you know. Some of you have let fear grab hold of you, and you're doing so to your own detriment. Let's get back to the story. He says, why are you afraid? What are you afraid of? Now, that's the question I was asking in the beginning. What is it that keeps you up at night? What are you afraid of? Do you still have no faith? After seeing all that the Lord has done, do you still have no faith? This is what he's asking. See, our job is to know the truth, live the truth, share the truth. This is the part of living the truth, right? So we know it. We know he can do all these things. Now we have to decide, am I going to live it? Am I going to walk in fear, or am I going to walk in faith in the Son of God? Now, not the foolish faith, not the prosperity junk that says, I don't have a cold, I just have the symptoms of a cold. Or, when we throw out loosely, by his stripes I'm healed, and not even know what that context of that passage is. I'm not speaking about that. God decides our days from beginning to end. Right? And there are times when he will send sickness to us. I know nobody likes to know that, but that's exactly what happened to the Apostle Paul. There was given to me a thorn in the flesh. Right? So it's important that we understand that. So this is where we're going, and this is what's taking place. Is there anything that God can't do? Can he part the waters? Can we be standing at the brink of something that keeps us from what we think is the promised land, and that there's no way across? I'm asking you a simple question. Do you believe that if you're standing with Jesus, journeying with him, that sea is going to stop you from getting to that destination? Or does he have the creative ability to part the sea like he did with Moses and the children of Israel, right? Do you believe that no matter how old you get, as long as you're breathing, you still have purpose? That it may feel like the sun is setting, but really in truth, can he cause the sun to stand still like he did with Joshua? Can he do that? This is good for me in my season of life to ask that question. Can he heal? Does he still heal today, and can he? Can he heal? Can he deliver people from the demoniac? He caused fish to jump in a boat. You know that, right? He caused a fish to find a coin somewhere in the sea so that when they were going to pay the taxes, they went and got that fish and pulled the coin out. You realize how crazy in control God is of life. And so we ask ourselves, can he do that? Can he take our lack and multiply it so that there's baskets of abundance around us, as he did with the fish and the loaves? And by the time they fed the 5,000 and they started to collect the leftovers, it filled up all the baskets. It's crazy stuff, right? Can he change water into wine? Can he take old stuff and make it new? Does he still do that? I guess this is the question that I just think we should ask ourselves, because I think too many of us are afraid about a lot of things. What do you trust in your life to? Really, when it comes down to it, what do you trust in your life to? I don't want to have the conversation about a vaccine or any of that stuff, but I'm just going to ask you, though, what are you trusting? I mean, I'm not saying don't take medicine or any of that. I'm just saying, though, what are you really trusting in? What are you trusting in? This is the crucial piece. If we're to go where Jesus wants to take us, we may know the truth. The question is, are we going to live the truth? If he is who he says he is, why are we worried? That's the question he's asking them. You still have no faith? So I'm going to remind you again, we may have a lot of stuff to think about. We don't have one thing to worry about. Not one thing. All right? Don't you worry today. This is your time to decide whether you're going to live what you know. All right? Man, love you guys. Lord bless you. I can't wait to see you Monday. Have a great weekend and enjoy this day. Lord bless you.